Exiled to the edge of the moors, she built a life in silence until the feared Duke found her cottage by mistake. She was kneeling in the mud when he found her, hands raw and bleeding from pulling turnips in the frozen ground, her once fine silk nightgown now a tattered rag beneath a coarse wool cloak. Clarissa Ashford didn't hear the horse approach through the November fog, didn't realize she was no longer alone until a shadow fell across her pathetic garden, and a voice like granite spoke from above. "So this is what becomes of the woman who destroyed my brother." She looked up, dirt streaking her hollowed cheeks, and met the eyes of the Duke of Greymont, the man whose family had orchestrated her exile, whose wealth could crush what little remained of her life with a single word. His face was as brutal as the moorland wind, carved from the same merciless stone as the cliffs beyond her cottage. "Your Grace," she whispered, and the title tasted like ashes and old shame. Wait, before the next confession unfolds, if this story has already stirred your heart, tell us where you're watching from. To make sure you don't miss the next betrayal, kiss, or redemption, subscribe and join our circle. The next heartbeat might change everything. Now, back to the scene. The Duke dismounted with the fluid grace of a man born to command, his black greatcoat sweeping the muddy ground as he approached. Clarissa remained kneeling, unable to rise. Whether from exhaustion or the weight of seeing him again, she couldn't say. 3 years. 3 years since the scandal that had obliterated her name, her family, her future. 3 years since Edmund Thorne, the Duke's younger brother, had been found dead in the gardens of Ashford House with her laudanum-laced wine-glass beside him. She had been 19 then, engaged to Edmund, desperately in love, or so she'd believed. Now, at 22, she was an exile, living on the furthest reach of the Yorkshire moors, where the wind howled like the ghosts of her former life, and no gentleman's name could follow to finish destroying her. "Stand up," Greymont commanded, and despite herself, despite everything, her body obeyed. Years of breeding couldn't be stripped away even by poverty and disgrace. She rose, swaying slightly, her bare feet numb in the November cold. She'd sold her last pair of shoes 2 months ago to pay for lamp oil. The Duke's eyes swept over her with clinical assessment, and she saw his jaw tighten. Whatever he'd expected to find, it wasn't this. The papers had called her a murderess, a temptress, a calculating seductress who'd poisoned his brother for his fortune. The woman before him looked like she'd been poisoned herself, slowly, by loneliness and deprivation. "You're thinner," he said, and it wasn't quite an accusation. "And you're bleeding. The ground is frozen, Your Grace. The turnips don't come willingly." Her voice was steadier than she felt. "If you've come to see my suffering, you may report to your family that it's sufficient. If you've come to exact further revenge, I have nothing left to take." "I didn't come for revenge." He moved closer, and she caught the scent of leather and sandalwood, the smell of a world she no longer belonged to. "I came because my brother's valet finally decided his conscience mattered more than his employment. He came to me yesterday with a letter, Edmund's letter, written the night he died." The world tilted. Clarissa's hand shot out, grasping at air, and then, somehow, Greymont's arm was there, steadying her. His touch was fire through the worn fabric of her cloak. "What?" The word barely escaped her lips. "Edmund killed himself, Miss Ashford. The laudanum was his own. The wine-glass was placed beside him deliberately, to implicate you." Greymont's voice was rough, as though each word scraped his throat raw. He was dying already. Consumption. The doctor said he had perhaps 6 months. He couldn't bear to waste away, couldn't bear for our mother to watch him fade. So he chose his moment, and he chose his scapegoat. "No! Clarissa shook her head violently, backing away from him. "No, Edmund loved me. He wouldn't." "He loved you enough to spare you the sight of his death, but not enough to spare you the consequences." Graymont pulled a folded paper from inside his coat. Even from a distance, she could see Edmund's familiar handwriting, could see the date, the night everything ended. He wrote that you were too good, too pure to be tied to a dying man, that you deserved a future, not a deathbed vigil. He thought society would whisper for a few months, then forget. He didn't understand what vipers we breed in London drawing rooms. The letter trembled in Graymont's hand, or perhaps it was his hand that trembled. Clarissa couldn't tell. Everything was fragmenting, reforming. 3 years. She'd spent 3 years believing herself a murderer, believing she'd somehow, accidentally, impossibly killed the man she loved. She'd relived that night 1,000 times, searching for the moment when she'd added laudanum to his wine, even though she couldn't remember doing it, even though it made no sense. Why didn't the valet come forward before? Her voice was hollow. Edmund paid him handsomely to remain silent for exactly 3 years. He believed by then you would have married someone else, moved on, and the revelation would only be a minor scandal, easily weathered. He didn't account for the fact that no man would touch the woman accused of murdering her fiancé. He didn't account for your father's death from shame 6 months later, or your mother's retreat to the continent, or your banishment to this God-forsaken place. Graymont's expression was bleak. "My brother was a fool, Miss Ashford. A coward and a fool, and I'm sorrier than words can express for what my family did to defend his memory. Your family destroyed me." The words came out flat, factual. "Your mother called me a serpent in the Times. Your sister ensured no household would employ me, not even as a governess. You yourself swore before half of London that you'd see me hang if the courts wouldn't do it." "I know." He looked at her directly then, and she saw something she'd never expected in the Duke of Graymont's eyes, genuine anguish. "I know what we did. I know what I did. And I know that standing here now telling you the truth doesn't undo 3 years of hell. But I'm trying, Miss Ashford. I'm trying to make this right. Nothing can make this right." Clarissa wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold beyond measure. "My father is dead. My mother won't see me. I have no name, no future, no—" Her voice cracked. "I loved him. I loved Edmund with everything I had, and he used that love to destroy me." "I know." Graymont took a step closer, and this time she didn't retreat. "And that's why I'm here. Not just to tell you the truth, but to offer you a choice. A choice." Bitterness flooded her mouth. "What choice could you possibly offer me?" "Marriage." The word hung in the mist-laden air between them like a hallucination. Clarissa laughed, a sharp, broken sound. "You're mad. The isolation has finally driven you mad." "I'm perfectly sane, unfortunately." Graymont's mouth twisted in something that might have been humor in a different life. "Listen to me. Society destroyed you based on my family's accusations. Nothing short of my family's complete reversal will restore you. If I marry you, if I publicly declare your innocence and my brother's guilt, if I make you a duchess, no one will believe you suddenly discovered the truth. They'll think I seduced you too, or blackmailed you, or let them think what they want. You'll have your name back, your position, your future." He paused. "And I'll have partially atoned for the worst thing I've ever done to another human being." Clarissa stared at him, searching for the trap, the hidden blade. The Duke of Graymont was known for his cold brilliance, his ruthless business dealings, his complete lack of mercy in political or social warfare. He was 32, unmarried by choice, wedded to duty and the vast Graymont estates. He'd never shown interest in any woman, and the few who'd tried to trap him had been dispatched with surgical cruelty. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why not just publish the letter, make a statement, let society rehabilitate me slowly? Why marriage?" Because slowly isn't enough. Because you're living in a cottage without shoes, pulling frozen turnips from the ground with bleeding hands. Because my brother took 3 years of your life, and I helped him do it. His voice dropped. And because I'm tired, Miss Ashford. Tired of being the duke everyone fears and no one knows. Tired of duty without purpose. If I must marry eventually to secure the line, why not marry someone who understands that marriages of convenience can still be honest arrangements between two people trying to survive? You're asking me to marry you out of guilt. It should have been insulting. Somehow, it felt more honest than any marriage proposal she'd received in her former life. I'm asking you to marry me out of justice. The guilt is mine to bear, not yours to absolve. Graymont held out Edmund's letter. Take it. Read it. I've retained rooms at the village inn 5 miles south. I'll return tomorrow at noon for your answer. If it's no, I'll publish the letter anyway and provide you with funds to rebuild your life however you see fit. If it's yes, we'll marry by special license within the week, and you'll never have to pull another turnip as long as you live." He placed the letter in her raw, dirt-stained hands and returned to his horse. Before mounting, he turned back. "For what it's worth, Miss Ashford, Edmund's letter spoke of your kindness, your laughter, your goodness. He loved you as much as a coward could love anyone. It wasn't enough to save you, but it was real." His eyes met hers. "You deserved better than my brother. You deserved better than what my family did to you. I can't give you back the past 3 years, but I can give you a future. The choice is yours." He rode into the mist, leaving Clarissa standing in her ruined garden with her dead fiancé's confession clutched in her bleeding hands. She didn't read the letter immediately. Instead, she walked back to her cottage, a generous term for the 2-room stone structure that leaked when it rained and filled with smoke when the wind changed. She laid the letter on the scarred wooden table and boiled water for tea with hands that shook. 3 years. 3 years of this existence, scraping by on the small inheritance her grandmother had left her, money no one could touch because it had been settled before the scandal. 3 years of villagers who wouldn't meet her eyes, of children who ran from the poison lady, of brutal loneliness broken only by Mrs. Kellen, the elderly widow who brought her bread once a week and never asked questions. 3 years of believing she'd somehow killed the man she loved. The tea was weak. She was rationing the last of her leaves, but it was hot, and it steadied her enough to finally unfold Edmund's letter. His handwriting was as familiar as her own, slightly slanted, enthusiastic. She'd kept all his letters during their engagement, had burned them after his death in a gesture of desperate grief. "My dearest Clarissa, if you're reading this, then my plan has worked, and I am gone. I hope you can forgive me, though I don't deserve it. I hope you understand, though I'm not certain I understand myself. The doctors tell me I have 6 months at most. 6 months of wasting away, of becoming a skeleton in a bed, of watching my mother weep and my brother rage helplessly at fate. 6 months of dragging you into the darkness with me, binding you to a dying man, watching the light fade from your beautiful eyes as you play nursemaid to a corpse. I couldn't bear it, Clarissa. I couldn't bear any of it. So I've chosen my moment and my method. The laudanum is my own. I've been hoarding my nightly doses for weeks. The wine glass beside me is yours from dinner, which I took when you weren't looking. I know how it appears. I know what they'll think. Here's what I've told myself. Society will whisper for a few months, perhaps even a season. But you're young, beautiful, brilliant. Your father's position and your dowry will protect you. By spring, some sensible gentleman will see past the gossip and offer for you. You'll marry, you'll have the life you deserve, and this whole unfortunate business will fade into distant memory. I've paid Williams, my valet, handsomely to keep this letter for 3 years before delivering it to my brother. 3 years should be enough time for you to have moved on, to have built a new life. The revelation will only be a minor footnote then, not a fresh scandal. I love you, Clarissa. I love you enough to let you go, to free you from the prison of caring for an invalid. I love you enough to give you back your future, even if the cost is your present. Forgive me, or don't, but please, please live. Live brilliantly and fully and joyfully, as I can no longer do. Eternally yours, Edmund. The letter fell from Clarissa's hands. She didn't cry. She'd exhausted tears months ago. Instead, she sat in the gathering darkness of her cottage and felt the full weight of Edmund's catastrophic misunderstanding settle over her like a burial shroud. Had thought she'd be protected. Had thought society would be kind. Had thought her father's position and her dowry would shield her from the worst of the scandal. He'd been wrong about everything. Her father's position had evaporated the moment the Earl of Greymont, the Duke's father, now deceased, had publicly declared her a murderess. Her dowry had been frozen by the court's pending investigation, and society hadn't whispered for a season, they'd roared for a year and continued to hiss for 2 more. Edmund had killed himself out of love and cowardice in equal measure, and had destroyed her as surely as if he'd poisoned her himself. The Duke had been right. Edmund was a fool. Clarissa stood, lit her single candle, she was rationing those too, and looked around her cottage. The roof had a new leak. The winter was coming. Her store of turnips would last perhaps another month if she was careful. After that, she'd be entirely dependent on Mrs. Kellen's charity, and Mrs. Kellen was 76 and struggling herself. Marriage to the Duke of Greymont would solve everything, would restore her name, her position, her future, would give her safety, security, perhaps even a measure of revenge as society scrambled to reverse their judgment. It would also bind her to the family that had destroyed her, to the brother of the man who'd used her as his scapegoat, to a man who, by his own admission, was marrying her out of guilt and exhaustion. But perhaps that was better than love. Love had given her Edmund, who'd loved her enough to die, but not enough to trust her with the truth. Love had given her 3 years of hell. Guilt was honest. Exhaustion was real. A marriage of convenience with clear terms, and no illusions, maybe that was the only kind of marriage she could trust anymore. Clarissa extinguished her candle and went to bed. Tomorrow she'd give the Duke her answer. She already knew what it would be. The Duke returned precisely at noon, his massive black horse appearing through the mist like something from a Gothic tale. Clarissa was waiting, dressed in the best of her remaining 3 dresses, a faded green wool that had once been suitable for morning calls and was now patched at both elbows. She'd washed her hair, braided it severely, and wrapped her hands in clean cloth to hide the worst of the damage. She looked like a poor relation dressed for church, not a woman about to become a duchess. Greymont dismounted and approached with a careful neutrality that suggested he'd prepared himself for rejection. "Your Grace." Clarissa curtsied, the movement automatic despite everything. "Miss Ashford." He inclined his head. "Have you decided?" "I have." She drew a breath. "I'll marry you with 3 conditions." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or relief. "Name them." "First, I want complete honesty between us. No lies of convenience, no protecting me from difficult truths. We may be entering this marriage out of necessity and atonement, but I won't live another lie." "Agreed." "Second, I want my own household budget and discretion over my own time. I'll perform every duty required of a duchess, but I won't be kept like a doll in a display case. I've learned to value my independence. Agreed, with one caveat. For the first 6 months, I ask that you attend major social events with me. We need to present a united front while society adjusts to the narrative. After that, you may do as you please. Clarissa nodded slowly. It was fair, given the circumstances. Third, I want one night a year where I can ask you anything, and you must answer truthfully, no matter how uncomfortable the question. Graymont studied her, a crease forming between his brows. Why? Because in a marriage of convenience, there are always secrets. I understand that. But I don't want to live in a house built entirely on things we don't say to each other. One night a year, we're completely honest, then we return to whatever comfortable arrangement we've built. It's my insurance against slowly disappearing again. You won't disappear. I give you my word. Then you'll have no trouble with my condition? A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. You're shrewder than I expected. 3 years alone on the moors teaches you what matters. Clarissa met his eyes. Do we have an arrangement, Your Grace? We do, Miss Ashford. He extended his hand, and after a moment she took it. His grip was warm, solid, real. I've had my solicitor draw up the marriage contracts with provisions for your protection. You'll have a generous settlement in your own name, regardless of what happens between us. If the marriage becomes unbearable, you'll have the means to leave. You're planning for failure before we've even begun? I'm planning for your freedom. There's a difference. Graymont released her hand, his expression unreadable. We'll marry in 3 days by special license. I've taken the liberty of sending for a modiste from York. She'll arrive tomorrow with appropriate clothing. We'll spend a brief week at Graymont Hall to establish you with the household, then return to London for the season. The timing is deliberate. We'll arrive just as Parliament opens, when society is too distracted by politics to focus entirely on scandal. You've thought of everything. I've thought of survival. For both of us. He paused. Pack whatever matters to you from the cottage. Everything else will be taken care of. Clarissa looked back at her small stone prison. There was nothing inside worth keeping except Edmund's letter, and she'd already decided to burn that. Some truths didn't need to be preserved. There's nothing, she said. I'm ready to leave. Now? Why wait? You have your answer, I have my conditions, and every moment in that cottage is another moment I'll never get back. She turned to him with something fierce in her eyes. You offered me a future, Your Grace. I'm accepting it. Now. Graymont studied her for a long moment, then nodded. He swung up onto his horse and extended his hand. Then, come, your new life begins today. Clarissa took his hand and let him pull her up behind him. She'd never ridden astride, never sat on a horse with nothing but a greatcoat between her and a gentleman's back. It was scandalous, intimate, completely inappropriate. It felt like freedom. As they rode away from the cottage, Clarissa didn't look back. She'd spent 3 years looking backward, replaying the past, trying to understand what she'd done wrong. Forward was the only direction that mattered now, even if forward meant marrying the man who'd vowed to see her hang. The village inn was a sturdy stone building that catered to travelers on the coaching route. Graymont had reserved the entire second floor, ensuring privacy and avoiding awkward questions about a duke arriving with a disheveled woman behind his saddle. Mrs. Hartley, the innkeeper's wife, was a practical woman who asked no questions when Graymont introduced Clarissa as his fiancée and requested a private suite, a hot bath, and suitable temporary clothing. Money exchanged hands, and suddenly Clarissa found herself in a warm room with a copper tub being filled by brisk maids, who exclaimed over her poor hands and clucked sympathetically about the difficulties of the roads this time of year. The Duke had rooms across the hall. He'd been scrupulously proper, almost distant since they'd arrived. "I'll leave you to rest," he'd said. "We'll dine together at 7 to discuss arrangements. Mrs. Hartley will provide anything you need." Then he disappeared into his own rooms, leaving Clarissa alone for the first time since mounting his horse. She sank into the bath and let the hot water leach 3 years of cold from her bones. Her hands stung where the water touched broken skin, but it was a clean pain, a healing pain. Someone had added lavender oil to the water. It smelled like luxury, like a world she'd thought she'd never inhabit again. Clarissa closed her eyes and let herself feel it. The shock of the Duke's revelation, the weight of Edmund's letter, the terrifying exhilaration of having said yes to a marriage that made no sense and perfect sense simultaneously. She was going to be a duchess, the Duke of Greymont's wife. She'd have power, position, wealth beyond imagining. She'd also have a husband who barely knew her, a society that would watch her every move with vulture eyes, and the ghost of Edmund hovering over everything. But she'd be warm. She'd be fed. She'd never have to pull frozen turnips again. It was enough. It had to be enough. A knock came at the door. "Miss Ashford?" Mrs. Hartley's voice was kind. "I've laid out some clothing for you. Nothing fancy, but clean and warm. And His Grace asked me to bring you these." Clarissa wrapped herself in a towel and opened the door. Mrs. Hartley handed her a bundle of simple but good quality clothing, a warm wool dress in deep blue, proper undergarments, stockings, and, blessedly, shoes. Beside them was a wooden box tied with ribbon. "His Grace said these belonged to his sister when she was about your age," Mrs. Hartley explained. "He thought they might suit until the modiste arrives." After Mrs. Hartley left, Clarissa opened the box. Inside were gloves, soft leather in a rich burgundy, and a delicate silver chain with a small pendant, a swallow in flight. There was a note in the Duke's angular handwriting. "For new beginnings. G." Clarissa fastened the chain around her neck and pulled on the gloves. They fit perfectly, covering the bandages on her hands. She dressed in the borrowed clothes, feeling like a stranger to herself. The woman in the mirror had clean hair, decent clothing, a silver necklace catching the light. She looked almost respectable. She looked almost like someone the Duke of Greymont might marry. At 7 precisely, she knocked on his door. Greymont opened it himself, having dismissed his valet. He'd changed into evening clothes. Nothing too formal, but elegant. In the lamplight, Clarissa could see him properly for the first time. He was handsome in a harsh way, all strong bones and winter coloring. His eyes were gray as slate, his dark hair slightly too long to be fashionable. There was a scar along his left jaw, pale and old. He looked like a man who'd been carved rather than born. "Miss Ashford." His eyes swept over her, and something eased in his expression. "The clothes suit you. Did you find the gloves adequate?" "They're perfect, thank you." She touched the pendant at her throat. "And thank you for this. It's lovely. My sister chose it. She said every woman should have something that belongs only to her, not to her circumstances." He stepped back, gesturing to a small table set for 2 near the window. "Shall we dine? We have a great deal to discuss." The meal was simple but excellent. Roasted chicken, vegetables, fresh bread, and wine. After 3 years of thin soup and turnips, it tasted like a feast. Clarissa forced herself to eat slowly, to maintain some dignity, even as her stomach cramped with hunger. Greymont noticed, of course. He said nothing, simply ensured her glass stayed full and that the serving dishes remained within easy reach. "Tomorrow the modiste arrives," he said when they'd finished the main course. "She'll outfit you completely. Day dresses, evening gowns, riding habits if you wish, everything appropriate for a duchess. The wedding will be private, just us, the vicar, and 2 witnesses. I thought you'd prefer to avoid spectacle." "I would, yes." Clarissa sipped her wine. What about your family? Your mother, your sister? They'll have to be told." "They've already been told." Greymont's voice was flat. "I sent an express this morning. My mother is displeased. My sister is confused but willing to meet you. They'll adjust." "They have no choice." "You told them about Edmund's letter?" "Every word. My mother wept. My sister was horrified. They understand what was done to you, and they understand this marriage is my attempt to rectify it." He met her eyes. "They also understand that if they offer you anything less than complete support, they'll never see me again. I've made that abundantly clear." Clarissa set down her glass carefully. "You'd cut off your family for me?" "I'd cut off my family for what's right. You're a convenient coincidence in that regard." He softened it with a slight smile. "Though I suspect once they meet you, convenience will become genuine regard. My sister at least has a taste for justice and complicated women. And your mother? My mother has a taste for grandchildren and social dominance. You'll provide the former eventually, if you're willing, and you'll certainly provide the latter. She'll come around." The casual mention of children sent a jolt through Clarissa. Of course, there would be an expectation of heirs. That's what aristocratic marriages were for. But the thought of sharing a bed with this stern, remote man, of allowing him the intimacies that children required, made her stomach twist with something between anxiety and a feeling she couldn't quite name. "About that," she said carefully. "The matter of heirs. What are your expectations?" Greymont looked at her directly, his expression unreadable. "My expectation is that we're both adults entering a difficult situation. The marriage will need to be consummated to be legal, and eventually an heir would be advisable for the estate's sake. Beyond that, I expect nothing you're not willing to give. We'll discuss it honestly when the time comes, and we'll proceed at whatever pace you're comfortable with. You've been through enough, Miss Ashford. I won't compound it by making demands on you." The relief was overwhelming. "Thank you. Don't thank me for basic decency. The bar shouldn't be that low." He poured her more wine. "Now, I need to explain what's going to happen when we return to London, because it won't be pleasant." For the next hour, Greymont outlined his strategy with military precision. They'd arrive at the height of the season and immediately host a ball, an unprecedented move for a couple just married, but precisely calculated to seize control of the narrative. At the ball, Greymont would read Edmund's letter aloud to the assembled guests, then present Clarissa as his wife. The shock would be enormous, the gossip immediate, but the sheer audacity of the gesture would intrigue society even as it scandalized them. "You'll be whispered about," Greymont warned. "They'll say I've been bewitched, or that you've somehow manipulated me, or that I've gone mad. They'll watch everything you do, waiting for you to reveal the calculating murderess they believed you to be. You'll need armor, Miss Ashford, emotional armor, and the wit to deploy it." "I've had 3 years to develop armor, Your Grace. Society will find me less vulnerable than they expect." "Good." He leaned back, studying her. "There's something else you should know. I'm not well liked among Dupin. I'm respected, feared, occasionally courted for my influence, but not liked. I don't suffer fools, I don't engage in the pretty lies of drawing-room politics, and I've made enemies by refusing to play the games they consider essential. You'll be marrying into isolation as much as you're marrying into position." "Isolation I'm familiar with." Clarissa met his eyes. "Pretty lies I'm done with. If we're going to be outcasts together, we might as well be honest outcasts." Something shifted in Greymont's expression. Approval, perhaps, or recognition. "My sister will like you," he said. "She's always said I needed someone who'd stand up to me." "I didn't realize I was standing up to you." "You negotiated terms for our marriage contract? You demanded honesty and independence." You're sitting here calmly discussing strategy instead of having a fit of vapors about the scandal to come. He smiled slightly. Trust me, Miss Ashford, you're standing up to me. Most people don't. Most people are probably afraid of you. Are you? Clarissa considered the question seriously. No, she said finally. I was afraid when you found me in the garden yesterday, afraid of what new torture your family might devise. But now? Now I think you're just a man trying to do the right thing for once and hoping it doesn't backfire spectacularly. That's not frightening. It's almost endearing. Graymont laughed, a genuine sound of surprise. Endearing? I've been called many things, Miss Ashford, but never that. Then people aren't looking closely enough. She smiled, and it felt strange on her face, like a long disused muscle remembering its purpose. You brought me gloves to hide my hands and a necklace to remind me I'm more than my circumstances. You're planning a social campaign on my behalf that could damage your own reputation. You've offered me every protection you can think of and asked for nothing in return, except that I be honest with you. That's either endearing or you're very good at long-term manipulation. Given my reputation, most people would assume the latter. Most people haven't lived through what I've lived through. You learn to recognize sincerity when your survival depends on it. Clarissa stood, suddenly exhausted. It's been a very long day, Your Grace. Might I retire? Graymont stood as well, ever the gentleman, despite everything. Of course. Tomorrow will be equally long. The modist is relentless, I'm told. We'll meet with the vicar at 2 to finalize the wedding arrangements. And the day after? The day after, we marry. He said it simply, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. Then your old life ends, and whatever this becomes, begins. Clarissa nodded and moved toward the door. As she reached it, Graymont spoke again. Miss Ashford? Clarissa? She turned. It was the first time he'd used her given name. You asked if I'm afraid of what we're doing. The truth is, I'm terrified. But I'm more terrified of doing nothing, of letting the injustice stand. So we're doing this, and we'll face whatever comes together. You won't be alone again. That's my promise. Clarissa felt something crack open in her chest, something she'd kept frozen since Edmund's death. Not hope, exactly. Hope was still too dangerous. But possibility, perhaps. The sense that forward might lead somewhere worth going. Then I promise you won't be alone either, she said softly. Whatever isolation you've lived in, you're inviting someone into it now. That's not nothing, Your Grace. That's not nothing at all. She left before he could respond, closing the door gently behind her. In her room, she undressed slowly, folded the borrowed clothes with care, and slipped between clean sheets that smelled of lavender and possibility. Tomorrow, the modiste. The day after, a wedding. And then a life she couldn't yet imagine, but was learning, slowly, to believe might actually be hers. Clarissa touched the silver swallow at her throat and closed her eyes. New beginnings, the Duke had written. She was ready to try. The modiste descended upon Clarissa like a perfumed whirlwind. Madame Rousseau was a Frenchwoman of indeterminate age, with sharp eyes, sharper pins, and absolutely no patience for false modesty. Within an hour, she had Clarissa stripped, measured, tutted over, and draped in more fabric samples than seemed physically possible. Too thin, Madame Rousseau muttered in heavily accented English. We must disguise this, but not too much. Society will expect some evidence of hardship, no? But you must look like a woman who has survived, not a woman who is dying. Sapphire, I think, and emerald, rich colors to bring life to the skin. And for the wedding, ivory silk with Brussels lace. Symbolic, yes? A new beginning, but acknowledging the past. Am not a virgin, Clarissa said flatly. Won't white or ivory seem hypocritical? Madame Rousseau paused in her pinning and fixed Clarissa with a penetrating stare. "You speak of your engagement to the Duke's brother, yes? The engagement that ended in tragedy and scandal?" "Yes." "Then you are not a hypocrite, mademoiselle. You are a woman who loved and lost and has been given a chance to begin again. Ivory is appropriate. It is also beautiful against your coloring. Now hold still while I pin this hem." The Duke appeared briefly around noon, exchanged words with Madame Rousseau in rapid French, nodded at Clarissa's current state of being draped in sapphire silk, and disappeared again. He seemed to occupy a strange space, of being both present and absent, there when needed, gone when not, like a ghost who'd learned good manners. "He is pleased," Madame Rousseau announced after he left. "You will be magnifique, and he knows it. Good. A duchess should be magnifique, even one with a complicated history, especially one with a complicated history." By evening, Clarissa had been fitted for 12 day dresses, 6 evening gowns, 3 riding habits, a staggering array of undergarments, nightclothes, a traveling ensemble, and the wedding gown. Madame Rousseau promised most of it would be ready within 48 hours, an impossible timeline made possible, Clarissa suspected, by the Duke's money and the modist's talent. The wedding gown would be ready tomorrow morning. It was, Madame Rousseau declared, her masterpiece. That evening, Clarissa dined with Graymont again. They discussed practical matters, the household at Graymont Hall, the London townhouse, the income she'd have access to, the accounts she'd need to manage. He was matter-of-fact about extraordinary sums, and she struggled not to feel overwhelmed by the sheer scale of wealth being casually discussed. "You'll have your own secretary," Graymont explained. "Mrs. Davies is extraordinarily competent and will help you navigate the household accounts and social obligations. She's also discreet and kind. I asked my sister to recommend someone who would be more ally than employee." "Your sister has been involved in planning this?" Clarissa was surprised. "Catherine insisted on helping once she understood the situation. She's eager to meet you, actually. She arrives at Graymont Hall tomorrow evening." He hesitated. "I should warn you, Catherine is intense. She has opinions about everything and isn't shy about expressing them. But she's also the most genuinely good person I know. If she decides she likes you, she'll defend you against the devil himself." "And if she decides she doesn't like me?" "Then we'll have a problem, because I told her if she's unkind to you in any way, I'll cut her allowance in half and refuse to sponsor her friend's charitable ventures." He smiled grimly. "Fortunately, Catherine is also fiercely opposed to injustice. Once she understands what Edmund did, what our family did, she'll be your staunchest ally." The next morning, Clarissa saw the wedding gown. It was stunning. Ivory silk with an overlay of Brussels lace. The sleeves fitted to the elbow, then flowing in delicate falls of fabric. The neckline was modest but elegant. The waist nipped in to give her starved frame some semblance of shape. Madame Rousseau had worked some kind of magic with ruching and draping to make Clarissa look fragile but not broken, romantic but not frivolous. "You see?" Madame Rousseau said with satisfaction. "Magnifique. The Duke will be most pleased." "This isn't about pleasing the Duke," Clarissa said quietly, staring at her reflection. "This is about reclaiming something." "Ah, but mademoiselle, sometimes they are the same thing." Madame Rousseau adjusted the lace at Clarissa's shoulder. "He is reclaiming his honor by making this right." You are reclaiming your life by accepting his offer. Both of you are pleased by the result. This is a good marriage, I think, better than many that begin with passion and end with bitterness. That afternoon, they met with the vicar. Reverend Blackwood was an elderly man with kind eyes and a practical demeanor. He asked the required questions, received the required answers, and blessed the special license without excessive drama. He did, however, pull Clarissa aside before they left. "Your Grace-to-be," he said gently, "I know something of your history. The village hears gossip. I want you to know that whatever happened, whatever society said, you're welcome in God's house and in this marriage. The Duke is a good man, if a hard one. You could do far worse. Thank you, Reverend. Clarissa felt unexpected tears prick her eyes. That means more than you know. That evening, Catherine arrived. Lady Catherine Thorne was 25, tall and possessed of the same intense gray eyes as her brother. She swept into the inn's private parlor where Clarissa was waiting, dismissed her maid with a gesture, and regarded Clarissa with frank assessment. So, you're the woman my idiot brother destroyed and is now attempting to save through matrimony, Catherine said without preamble. Let me be clear. I think the entire situation is absurd, dramatic, and completely in keeping with my family's talent for making spectacular mistakes. That said, I also think you've been grievously wronged, and I'm prepared to like you if you give me any reason to do so. Clarissa blinked. That's very honest of you, Lady Catherine. Please, just Catherine. We're about to be sisters, and I detest formality among family. Catherine threw herself into a chair with complete disregard for her elegant gown. Now, tell me everything. The truth, not the version Geoffrey thinks I should hear.
Were you in love with Edmund? Do you hate us? Are you marrying Geoffrey out of revenge or desperation? I need to know what I'm working with. Despite herself, Clarissa laughed. Your brother said you had opinions. My brother is a master of understatement. Catherine leaned forward. Well? Clarissa considered lying, considered softening the truth, then remembered her first condition, honesty. I was desperately in love with Edmund. Young love, first love, the kind that feels like it will kill you when it ends. Then he died, and I thought I'd killed him, and it did nearly kill me. Not the love, but the guilt, the shame, the isolation. She met Catherine's eyes. I don't hate your family. Hatred requires energy I don't have anymore. I resent what was done to me. I'm angry about the years I lost. But hate? No, I'm too tired for hate. And the marriage? Desperation and opportunity in equal measure. Your brother is offering me a way back into a life I thought was gone forever. I'd be a fool to refuse it. But I'm also offering him something: honesty, partnership, and perhaps, eventually, something resembling friendship. We're both tired, Catherine. We're both done with pretty lies. This marriage may be unconventional, but it's real. That's more than most society marriages can claim. Catherine was quiet for a long moment, studying Clarissa with those piercing gray eyes. Then she smiled, a genuine, warm expression that transformed her face. I'm going to like you, she announced, and I'm going to make damn sure the rest of society does too. Welcome to the family, Clarissa. It's small, it's damaged, and it has a spectacular talent for self-destruction, but we're loyal to our own. You're one of ours now. Clarissa felt something ease in her chest. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Wait until you've survived your first London ball as a Greymont. Then you can decide if you're grateful. Catherine stood and pulled Clarissa to her feet. Now, let me see this famous wedding gown Madame Rousseau won't stop crowing about. Tomorrow you marry my impossible brother, and I intend to ensure you look stunning enough to make all of London question their previous judgment. That night, Clarissa slept deeply for the first time in 3 years. Tomorrow, she'd become a duchess. Tomorrow, her new life would truly begin. Tomorrow, she'd marry a man she barely knew to escape the ruin caused by a man she loved. It should have terrified her. Instead, she felt something like peace. The morning of the wedding dawned cold and bright.
Clarissa woke in the room at the inn that had become briefly familiar, and for a moment she couldn't remember where she was or why. Then it all flooded back. The Duke, the letter, the proposal, the impossible choice that had become her salvation. Today she would marry. Catherine arrived at dawn with a small army of helpers. I know Jeffrey wanted the wedding to be private, but that doesn't mean you should look anything less than spectacular. Now, into the bath with you. We have work to do. The next hours passed in a blur of preparation. The wedding gown, delivered that morning by a triumphant Madame Rousseau, fit perfectly. Catherine had brought jewels, simple but elegant pieces from the Graymont collection. Nothing too ostentatious, she explained. You're not trying to overwhelm them with wealth. You're trying to remind them you belong in their world. Subtle power is always more effective than obvious display. Clarissa's hair was dressed in an elegant style, half up with soft curls framing her face. Catherine insisted on minimal cosmetics. You're beautiful enough, and we want genuine emotion to show, not paint. But a touch of color to her lips and cheeks. The gloves Graymont had given her covered her still healing hands. The silver swallow rested against her throat. When she looked in the mirror, Clarissa barely recognized herself. The woman staring back was poised, elegant, aristocratic. She looked like someone the Duke of Graymont might actually choose to marry. "Perfect," Catherine breathed. "Oh, Clarissa, you're absolutely perfect. Jeffrey won't know what hit him." "That's not really the point of this marriage," Clarissa said, but she felt a flutter of something, nervousness, perhaps, or anticipation. "Isn't it?" Catherine's smile was knowing. "My brother may claim this is about duty and atonement, but I saw his face when he talked about you. There's more there than he's admitting, even to himself. Give it time." Before Clarissa could respond, there was a knock at the door. Mrs. Hartley's voice came through. "Miss Ashford, His Grace has sent word. The vicar is ready." This was it, the moment of transformation. Clarissa took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and let Catherine lead her downstairs. The ceremony was to be held in the inn's small private chapel, hardly a grand venue, but intimate and, in its own way, perfect. Reverend Blackwood was waiting, as were Graymont and his man of business, who would serve as witnesses along with Catherine. But it was Graymont himself who made Clarissa pause in the doorway. He wore formal evening dress despite the early hour, all black except for his white cravat and the Graymont signet ring on his finger. His dark hair was immaculately styled, his jaw freshly shaved. He looked every inch the powerful Duke he was, remote, formidable, untouchable. Until he turned and saw her. Then his expression shifted, cracked open, and for just a moment, Clarissa saw something raw and real in his winter-gray eyes. Awe, perhaps, or recognition, or simply the acknowledgement that they were both standing on the edge of something irreversible and frightening and necessary. He crossed to her in 3 long strides and took her gloved hands gently. "Clarissa," he said quietly, "you look acceptable?" She tried for lightness. "Extraordinary." His voice was rough. "Are you certain? Even now, even at this moment, if you want to leave, I'll help you disappear. You'll never have to pull turnips again. I'll make sure of that. But if this isn't what you want—" "It's what I choose," Clarissa interrupted. "There's a difference, Jeffrey. This isn't about what I want. It's about what I'm willing to do to survive and reclaim some semblance of a life. I choose this. I choose you. Now let's get married before I lose my nerve." He smiled, a real smile this time, warm and surprised. "You never lose your nerve.
It's one of the things I'm learning to admire about you." They turned together to face the vicar. Catherine took her position as witness, beaming like this was a love match for the ages instead of a marriage of conscience and convenience. The Duke's man of business, Mr. Pemberton, stood solemn and proper beside her. Reverend Blackwood began the ceremony. The words were familiar. Clarissa had heard them at a dozen society weddings, had dreamed of speaking them with Edmund. But this was different. This was real in a way those dreams had never been. There were no illusions here, no pretty promises about eternal love. Just two damaged people promising to face whatever came next together. "Wilt thou have this woman to thy wedded wife, to live together after God's ordinance in the holy estate of matrimony? Wilt thou love her, comfort her, honor and keep her in sickness and in health, and, forsaking all others, keep thee only unto her, so long as ye both shall live?" "I will." Geoffrey's voice was steady, absolute. "Wilt thou have this man to thy wedded husband, to live together after God's ordinance in the holy estate of matrimony? Wilt thou love him, comfort him, honor and keep her in sickness and in health, and, forsaking all others, keep thee only unto him, so long as ye both shall live?" Clarissa looked at Geoffrey, at this stern, complicated man who'd found her in the mud and offered her a way back from the edge. "I will." The vows continued. They repeated the words after Reverend Blackwood, promising to have and to hold, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health. When it came time for the ring, Geoffrey produced a band of gold set with small diamonds. Elegant, beautiful, clearly valuable, but not ostentatious. "With this ring I thee wed, with my body I thee worship, and with all my worldly goods I thee endow. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen." He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as though it had been made for her. Perhaps it had been. She wouldn't put it past Geoffrey to have had it sized based on the gloves he'd given her. "Those whom God hath joined together, let no man put asunder," Reverend Blackwood intoned. Then, with a kind smile, "You may kiss your bride, your grace." Geoffrey's hands came up to cradle her face with surprising gentleness. He searched her eyes, giving her one last chance to pull away, then lowered his head and kissed her. It was soft, careful, almost chaste, a promise more than a passion. But underneath the gentleness, Clarissa felt something else, a spark of possibility, a hint that this marriage of convenience might become something neither of them had planned for. When they separated, Catherine was crying happy tears. Mr. Pemberton was smiling. Reverend Blackwood looked pleased. And Clarissa, for the first time in 3 years, felt like she might actually survive what life had thrown at her. "Your Grace," Geoffrey said softly, trying out the title. "My Duchess." "Your Grace," she replied, equally formal. Then, quieter, "Geoffrey." "Clarissa." He squeezed her hands. "Thank you." "For what?" "For taking a chance on this, on me, on the possibility that forward might be better than backward. Thank you for giving me the choice." They signed the register. Catherine hugged Clarissa with fierce enthusiasm. Mr. Pemberton offered stiff congratulations. Reverend Blackwood blessed them once more for good measure. And just like that, Clarissa Ashford ceased to exist. In her place stood Clarissa Thorne, Duchess of Greymont, one of the most powerful women in England. She'd reclaimed her life. Now she had to figure out how to live it. They traveled to Greymont Hall that afternoon, a journey of several hours through increasingly wild countryside. The carriage was luxurious, warm, and quiet, except for the sound of wheels on the road and the occasional comment from Catherine, who'd insisted on accompanying them. "You'll like Greymont Hall," Catherine said.
It's enormous and drafty and full of portraits of disapproving ancestors, but the library is wonderful and the grounds are beautiful. Mother is there, of course, but I've had a word with her. She'll be civil or she'll be cut off from her favorite grandchildren, namely the ones she hopes you'll provide. Catherine, Geoffrey said warningly. What? It's true. Mother's practical above all else. Once she realizes Clarissa is the best thing that could have happened to this family, she'll come around. Probably. Catherine grinned. Besides, I'm not leaving Greymont Hall until I'm satisfied you're both settled. Consider me your personal champion and social strategist. Clarissa found herself grateful for Catherine's presence. The reality of what she'd done, married a virtual stranger, agreed to enter one of England's most powerful families, committed to facing down society's judgment, was beginning to settle over her like a heavy cloak. Having an ally, even one as chaotic as Catherine, made it bearable. Greymont Hall appeared as the sun began to set. It was vast, gray stone rising from manicured grounds, all Gothic spires and mullioned windows. It looked ancient, powerful, and completely intimidating. Clarissa's first thought was that she'd never belong here. Her second thought was that she'd once believed she'd never belong anywhere again, and she'd been wrong then, too.
Home, Geoffrey said quietly, watching her face. Or it will be, eventually. For now, it's just a very large house full of very old furniture and a mother you'll have to win over. No pressure. I've survived worse, Clarissa said, and realized she meant it. The Dowager Duchess of Greymont was waiting in the drawing room, a formidable woman in her 60s with silver hair and Geoffrey's eyes. She stood as they entered, her posture rigid with disapproval, and something else, perhaps guilt, perhaps uncertainty. "Mother," Geoffrey said formally, "may I present my wife, Clarissa, Duchess of Greymont. Clarissa, this is my mother, the Dowager Duchess." Clarissa curtsied deeply, correctly. "Your Grace, it's an honor to meet you." The Dowager studied her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, her expression crumpled. "My dear child," she said, her voice breaking, "I am so dreadfully sorry. What we did to you, what I said about you in the papers, I believed Edmund's death to be murder. I believed you to be guilty. I wanted someone to blame for losing my son, and you were the convenient target. I was wrong, so terribly, unforgivably wrong." She crossed to Clarissa and took her hands, damaged hands beneath the gloves, hands that had pulled turnips and scrubbed floors, and learned what suffering meant. "Can you ever forgive me? Can you ever forgive this family for what we took from you?" Clarissa hadn't expected this. She'd braced herself for coldness, hostility, barely concealed resentment. This raw grief and genuine remorse left her off balance. She looked at Geoffrey, who nodded slightly. "Honesty," they agreed, "always honesty." "I don't know if I can forgive yet, Your Grace. The hurt is still too fresh, even 3 years later. But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to build something new, to move forward instead of remaining frozen in the past. If you're willing to do the same, perhaps we can find a way." The Dowager nodded, tears streaming down her face. "That's more than I deserve." "Thank you, my dear. Thank you for giving me a chance." Catherine, ever practical, intervened. "Enough emotion for one day. Clarissa must be exhausted. Let's get her settled in her rooms, then we can have a civilized dinner and begin planning the London campaign." "Campaign?" Clarissa asked. "The season begins in 3 weeks, Catherine explained as they climbed the grand staircase. "That gives us just enough time to finalize your wardrobe, establish you in the household, and prepare for the ball where you'll make your debut as Geoffrey's Duchess. It's going to be spectacular, dramatic, and absolutely scandalous. Society won't know what hit them." Clarissa's rooms were stunning, a suite of 3 chambers connected by wide doorways. The bedroom held a massive 4-poster bed draped in blue silk. The sitting room had a fireplace, comfortable furniture, and windows overlooking the grounds. The dressing room was larger than her entire cottage on the moors. "Joffrey's rooms connect through that door," Catherine said, pointing to an unobtrusive door in the bedroom wall. "Traditional arrangement for ducal couples. You can lock it from your side if you wish. Joffrey would never enter without invitation." After Catherine left, Clarissa stood at the window and looked out at the darkening grounds. Somewhere out there, beyond the manicured lawns and ancient oaks, the moors stretched wild and empty. She'd lived on their edge for 3 years, existing more than living, surviving more than thriving. Now she was here, in luxury she'd only dreamed of, married to a man she barely knew, about to face down the society that had destroyed her. A knock came at the connecting door. "Clarissa, may I come in?" "Yes." Joffrey entered, still in his wedding clothes, looking slightly uncertain. "I wanted to make sure you had everything you needed, and to discuss arrangements." "Arrangements? For tonight? Traditionally, the wedding night is—" He trailed off, then started again. "I know this marriage isn't conventional. I know you need time. I'm not expecting— that is, I won't be." He stopped, frustrated. "I'm usually better with words." Clarissa took pity on him. "You're asking if I expect you to consummate the marriage tonight." "Yes, and I want you to know I'm not expecting it. We have time. We can proceed slowly." "The marriage needs to be consummated to be legal," Clarissa said carefully. "You said so yourself, and delaying it will only make it more fraught, more anticipated, more difficult. If we must do it, Jeffrey, let's do it tonight. Get it over with, remove the specter of expectation, and then we can figure out what comes next without that hanging over us." He looked at her searchingly. "You're certain?" "I'm certain of very little these days, but I'm certain that I'd rather face this now than spend weeks dreading it. I'm certain that you've been nothing but kind to me, even when you didn't have to be. And I'm certain that if I must share a bed with someone, you're probably the safest choice I could make." "Safe? That's a rousing endorsement." His mouth quirked slightly. "In my world, safe is the highest compliment I can give." Clarissa moved closer to him. "We're adults. We've both entered this with open eyes. Let's be practical about this, as we've been practical about everything else." Jeffrey reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his hands. "If at any moment you want to stop, we stop. No questions, no judgment, no consequences. Agreed?" "Agreed." "Then, shall we?" What followed was awkward and tender and strangely intimate despite being utterly pragmatic. Jeffrey was careful, gentle, asking permission at every stage. Clarissa found herself grateful for his consideration, even as she wrestled with the strangeness of being vulnerable with this man who'd been her enemy mere days ago. It hurt less than she'd feared. It was less romantic than she'd once dreamed. But it was real, and it was honest, and when it was over, Jeffrey held her carefully as though she were something precious he was afraid of breaking. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. Processing." Clarissa rested her head against his shoulder. "It's done. We're truly married now, in every sense." "We are." He stroked her hair absently. "For what it's worth, I'll try to make this marriage bearable, perhaps even good. You deserve that much. So do you." They fell asleep that way, tangled together more from exhaustion than passion. Two broken people who'd made a bargain and were trying to figure out how to keep it. When Clarissa woke in the morning, Jeffrey was already gone, but there was a note on his pillow, written in his angular hand. "Good morning, wife. Catherine has planned your entire day. I've escaped to the estate office. See you at dinner. G." Clarissa smiled, tucked the note away, and prepared to face her first full day as a duchess.